That's why we triple checked that 3 of us would be here. Good. Stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As a way of respecting, honoring, and creating awareness about our past, we begin our village board meetings by acknowledging that New Paltz is on the ancestral land of the Munsee, Esopus, and Lenape people.
As far as amendments to the agenda, within the consent agenda, I would like to add item number 5. So regretfully, we will accept John Litton's resignation as chair of the planning board. Special public thank you to John for serving on the planning board, being the ZBA chair, and then returning to be the chair of the planning board. I think in total, he served for over 10 years, and he will be sorely missed. Huge contributor, and we're very grateful. And we're excited to, in response to John's resignation, to appoint Zach Bielecki as the chair of the planning board. Zach started serving within the village on the Historic Preservation Commission, has been serving on the planning board for some time. And we've been discussing the possibility of Zach serving as planning board chair for some time. And I'm very excited that he agreed to it, and he's really I think fitting very nicely, having functioned as a replacement chair, you know, the handful of times that John hasn't been there, and he's really doing a great job. Within the business agenda, I would like to add another item regarding cannabis, and this is regarding the lease that was executed by Dasney in between Dasney and the property owner at 98 North Chestnut Street. And item number 3, this is related to our intention to apply for a 7th year in a row to the Mid-Hudson Regional Economic Development Council for either DRI or New York Forward. And that is, oh, and then I also wanted to add a letter to item number 6. So it'd be 6A. This would be a survey where we're going to ask for the community to share information about their experiences with discolored water within our New Paltz municipal water system. And that is it. I'd like to move that we accept both the consent and business agenda as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
And I'd like to move the consent agenda. All in favor? Do we have any announcements from board members?
I just wanted to mention this, most of the community already knows, but one of our beloved community members, Dennis McKee, passed away. He was such an amazing volunteer for us and was on the planning board, and a lot of people know him as just being very thoughtful and a kind, funny person with a great laugh. And so I just wanted to just send condolences out to our community.
Thanks for making that announcement. Yeah, Dennis is a charming person who will be missed sorely.
Yeah, thank you for that, Michelle. I have some announcements too. So our friend Jordan Taylor, who passed away tragically earlier this year, we had a great memorial service from this past weekend. So now there's a fund set up in his name to support the Black Studies Department at SUNY New Paltz, and we're hoping to make that a forever thing to add to Jordan's great legacy. So to find that fund, you can go to bit.ly/JMT-SUNY. And it's all lowercase, and there's flyers that are all around and on social media and stuff. So it's a good way to remember him. And there's a brick being installed on campus that should be in today, if not sometime this week. So when you go for walks on campus, where the memory bricks are, keep an eye out for, our old friend Jordan. Also a reminder, the free food fridge, is here for all of us all the time, right outside 25 Lattikill Avenue. Donations are always needed. Check out the do's and don'ts at millionsofbutterflies.org/free-food-fridge. Narcan and other harm reduction services are always available to anyone anywhere in Ulster, thanks to Ellenville Regional Hospital's Project Rescue program. So please text ERH Rescue to 21000 and they'll connect with you accordingly. I got to talk with some of the folks from that program 2 weeks ago at the VFW at an event, and they were like, thank you for sharing this every single meeting. So I'm really committed to continuing to do so. And I think that's it for now.
Great. You want to bounce into the business agenda? So under cannabis, we have the first in New York State Grower Showcase. Will take place starting tomorrow behind our DPW garage from 4 to 8 p.m. And then I'll be repeated Friday afternoon, 4 to 8 p.m. and then on Saturday from 1 to 8 p.m. So this is a New York State Office of Cannabis Management initiative that is focused on supporting the growers who were told to grow cannabis, and the rollout for creating legal dispensaries has been complicated and a little slower than many have anticipated. So this was to create a bit of a safety valve to help the growers manage some of their inventory. And some local individuals have been spearheading that project in partnership with our village. And the it's a very interesting situation, and we've been communicating carefully with our police department, and I feel like the folks who are organizing it are trying to dot every I, but it might be tricky and congested. I was speaking with a guy from New York State this morning, and he was talking about how crazy it was when a Chick-fil-A opened up in his hometown, and we see that when the new restaurant shows up, and within the last couple of years when free COVID tests were handed out. So I imagine there will be some congestion. The village has hired a staff to keep their eye on it. The police have reassured us that they feel comfortable, and we'll be carefully monitoring congestion and traffic. And our plan too is to see how it goes and to make adjustments for subsequent markets. So it's a completely new frontier, but I think we're approaching it as thoughtfully and carefully as possible.
Yeah, and so I'm really excited that the folks from the Office of Cannabis Management will be here with us to kick it off tomorrow afternoon too.
Yep, that's pretty significant that the folks from Office of Cannabis Management will be joining us for this ribbon cutting. And then it's interesting that we're also sharing this news while this first showcase is taking place, but we were given the green light to share information about the fact that DASNY has executed a lease with the property owner at the former Stewart's property at 98 North Chestnut Street. And they are anticipating building out the interior of that building this fall. And they are anticipating that OCM will have a social justice licensee to occupy the space, and the space could open as a dispensary as soon as the end of December. And just to provide a little bit of context, so there are 3 social justice licenses in existence in New York State currently. One's in Ithaca, there's one on Bleecker Street in Manhattan, and then there's a 3rd at Union Square in Manhattan. And there are other leases that have been signed that DASNY is working on getting up and running, and New Paltz's location is one of those projects that DASNY is in the midst of working on. Did I leave any other details that I wanted to share about that?
Well, the 3 card dispensaries, because there's other kinds of card licenses
Absolutely.
that have been awarded. Like one of the folks who will actually be speaking tomorrow afternoon here, back to the point A about our cannabis grower showcase, is Matt Robinson, who is the card licensee behind Legacy Dispensary in the Capital Region, who's running the security for the showcase.
Right. So I think that's an important
Distinction.
in that there are card licenses for dispensaries, there are card licenses for manufacturers. And then also there are other dispensaries that are open in New York State that are not part of the card program.
Right. So, I mean, there's the different layers of licenses, right? What is it? Like 9 different ones. And so I don't know if there's card licenses in each of those 9 areas. I think there are. But there's cultivators, there's nurseries, processors, distributors, cooperatives, micro businesses, retail dispensaries, on-site consumption, delivery. So what we're talking about is retail dispensary. Yeah.
And there has been some questions about the former Stewart's proximity to the Memorial Pool property. So a couple of things. The guidelines in terms of where dispensaries might be located, they're not applicable to card. So that's number one. Number two, the issue with citing dispensaries within X number of feet of schools or churches is a thing, or a youth facility. However, only if the local government has updated their zoning to specifically address youth facilities. And our board has been very clear that we did not intend to address what the Office of Cannabis might do or not do, and get involved in terms of creating new zoning. But I have been reassured by DASNY that they also would have never executed a lease with a property owner if there were any issues whatsoever in terms of proximity to any other facilities as they are discussed in terms of rules and what the OCM guidelines involve. So that is it as far as cannabis. So we're not taking any action. It's really just an update on our business agenda. Do we have any other questions, follow up? No. Okay. So the next item is there is a proposal for I believe it's a 26-room hotel at 11 Water Street. That's the former Box Factory. And at the last planning board meeting, they were looking for some guidance in terms of where this hotel would be sited, because it would be on the property right next door to the village-owned rail trail property. And we had shared this some time ago with the developer that the path of least resistance, and I think what I would suggest that makes the most sense is simply using the easement that was extended to Zero Place. So, if anyone has been to Zero Place, you can walk from the back of that building onto the rail trail. And in addition, that property owner is also responsible for maintenance of the property along the rail trail that's actually on village property. So the property owner at Zero Place has an easement to maintain that area, and that makes total sense in terms of a value to the village, because it's more property that the village is not responsible for maintaining, but we're comfortable with having, a simple connection from this proposed hotel project to the rail trail. But the whole review of the project, that's in the hands of the planning board. So this is simply just to let the planning board know that, while they're looking at these plans, and we don't have an action to take this evening, but I thought it made sense to discuss this publicly, just to be able to show the planning board that this is most likely the direction that we would go in. But I want to open it up to Michelle and Alex, who are here, who can, add any comments if you guys, what are your thoughts about following this path?
Yeah, I mean, I read about what, the thoughtfulness that Corey has put into it too, and I feel like everybody's really on top of all the things that are becoming questions from us as well as the public.
Oh, that's for the hotel itself.
Yeah.
So I feel confident that we have an engaged planning board, an engaged building department, and that's their responsibility and their purview. But I just know that the planning board was looking for, like, well, how will that work in terms of the proximity with this proposed project, whatever the project ends up looking like. I feel like we get to be agnostic about that. But just in terms of, can you walk across the village property onto the rail trail? And then also the benefit of having some sort of agreement where they're allowed to maintain the landscaping. So that's all I was interested in addressing.
Yeah,
this evening.
that's always been like a little cut through, for kind of that whole nook of the village. And one of my favorite things, like when I go running, is like that's how I get to the trail, like meandering down through there. So as long as we maintain that public access, I feel.
Do either of you guys have the proposed site plan up?
Oh, I did a second ago. Let me pull up again.
Autumn and I were looking at that closely the other day, and I feel like, so this is where they are proposing to get onto the rail trail from the hotel. But I think what you're talking about here is like if you cross this parking lot and then took these stairs, that's how you would get up. So as long as you could connect.
Like I want to be able to get there from, the weird.
See these stairs here?
Pencil Hill,
And that's
Mohawk Ave, Water Street
if you
section.
go from the rail
How we all
trail
walk there.
down the stairs into the parking lot, like that existing path that we're all super familiar with,
Yeah.
it would, I guess, it would continue to feel like it exists.
And if it just didn't exist, it would really just not only stink for the public, but I think it would stink for the project too.
Yeah.
Like, just because it's like, I blindly just go that way.
So looking at this, right, you can see that little gray path, and I feel like that green area should just be colored gray so that it's clear that you can get from the path to those stairs. So even a hotel patron could go from the parking lot onto the rail trail, or the public could walk across the parking lot. So that might be like R1.
I think that's my one big thing.
Yeah, that would be a nice, just make that clear on their proposed site plan, so we could relay that back.
And otherwise, and I think like there's like safety issues, like if that isn't very clear too, because then what you wind up having is people just walking along like Water Street and then connecting to the rail trail, like further down on Plains Road.
Yeah.
And that's just like not ideal with cars and stuff at those turns.
Yeah, then they
I
don't
want them
have
to get
to
on the rail trail sooner.
get on the rail trail sooner. And then like this is the end of the sidewalk that will take you up along Water Street. But I think your point is like, at least then you have the option to get on the rail trail or off the rail trail sooner.
Exactly.
But that could be like our one suggestion to the planning board to take a closer look at. Any other thoughts?
No, just I really appreciate linking the zero place easement in the agenda because, you know, finding that stuff isn't the easiest for the general public. So
Yeah.
thanks for making sure that happened.
Yeah, and I like the idea of not reinventing a wheel, like let's use an existing easement that we've already vetted. I remember when we
Yeah.
agreed to that, it was a fairly complicated process that involved our attorney as well as the developer's attorney at the time. Okay, then item number 3. So the application deadline for DRI or New York Forward was announced, and that would be the end of September. So we've been discussing for some time to brainstorm with RUPCO about a project that would involve this property. We're actually going to chat with them on Friday, continue that brainstorming. We partnered with RUPCO and did a training together with Pattern for Progress. So this is really a housekeeping exercise. I'm glad that Autumn put this on the agenda. It's just sending a note that we intend to submit our application at the end of September, but the letter of intent deadline is August 18th. So we're just putting this on here, and then if our board agrees, we could make sure that we get that letter of intent out the door. But then the details about what is actually in that grant app, that will be worked on primarily in September. I move that we agree to submit the letter of intent by August 18th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Yeah, I saw the Village of Ellenville sent out a whole announcement. Time to get looking at this.
Yeah, and I would absolutely be in support of partnering with the Village of Ellenville. It's kind of fun comparing notes with them and submitting a joint application last time, doing something similar. So
We'll see. Yeah.
maybe we could do something similar, like what we did last time was we each submitted an individual application to New York Forward, and then we submitted a joint application to DRI. Okay, the next item is the building department. So we had discussed at our last meeting that we're looking for candidates for a director of planning and building, as well as code enforcement officials like a building inspector 1 or a building inspector 2. And then also the county has a job description called zoning coordinator. So we just wanted to make sure that that was on as many people's radar as possible, that we're looking to hire individuals. And it might not be that we're looking to hire each one of them. It could be very like candidate specific. If we find, you know, this person and that person, that might be the right combination, or of, you know, this number of part-time people or this number of full-time people, or any combination that we might come across. And I like the idea of it being candidate driven, and also just being really mindful about like where we should be taking the building department management moving forward. Just trying to take advantage of the fact that we have this opportunity to think about who does what, how different things are done, how to make the process as efficient as possible. So that's part of the exercise that we've been working on.
Did we post this at Ulsterworks?
I don't know that we posted it at Ulsterworks, but we should.
Yeah, because they do a good job of resharing on their social media. Like the Ulster County Career Development Center has been like on point, so that might be good.
Yeah, I saw that our sister village in Ulster County, Ellenville, also included on their social media that they were looking for some similar hires. So I shared that.
Yeah.
We're also always open to collaborating with other municipalities that share staff if there was some sort of magical combination that worked. But yeah, it's very hard to find employees for some of these jobs. Any other thoughts? I mean, that was again more of an announcement agenda item. So the next item is we've had this for our last couple of meetings. It's just it's like a tickler that we're committed to figuring out. We just have not moved forward. And we actually do have some research on the topic that I'd like to take a closer look at before we commit to exactly where we want to go. And then item number 6, we have a draft response to the New York City DEP. We received communication from them on August 4th. One thing that I have been trying to impress upon the DEP is that when they do their shutdown, and if they eventually get Water District number 5 online, there may be challenges in terms of how the water is introduced into our conveyance system, because water from Mountain Rest Road now comes from the west. And then if we are not receiving water from the aqueduct, then we're receiving the majority of our water from the south. What will happen within our conveyance system in terms of our tuberculated pipes? Will that be a situation where we're stirring up significant amounts of brown water? And I was actually fairly dismayed that the response from the DEP was like, well, that's a local problem. You have to figure that out. You guys have to pay for that. And
yeah, I'm not going to interrupt. Go on.
so, you know, I feel like, you know, we've had some success working with the DEP over the years, and sometimes it's been very challenging. And I feel like, you know, we often have to be our own advocate and our community's advocate, because a lot of that seems to be overlooked by our colleagues down in New York City. One thing that I think, and this came out of a conversation that we had with engineers this week, because all of us sitting in this room have heard people in New Paltz complain about episode of brown water. And we have some details in terms of how often we get complaints and who are the complaints from. But I'd like to more formally ask our community how often they see brown water and where they're seeing it. So I guess it's less important about how often, it's more about where, because I think that's kind of the challenge that we face, is that if we're sending water from the south into this conveyance system, which is just like a bowl of spaghetti of different water mains and service lines, the water will flow in a new direction, or a direction that's unfamiliar to our conveyance system. And I could imagine a situation where you have the water flowing in an unfamiliar pattern, you end up with a ton of brown water at the beginning of the shutdown, and then when you have to terminate the shutdown and reintroduce water from the west again, you get more brown water. So it's going to be like a longer amount of time than anyone would expect for brown water. And my concern too is that it's very time consuming and a lot of work for our staff
I was just
to
thinking
deal
that.
with brown water. And I think there's also a legitimate concern about pressure circulating within our system in an unfamiliar way, and the potential for water main breaks. And the DEP's response to that is like, well, this will all be done at like industry standard pressures, and therefore, you know, they don't really seem to care, which we don't have an industry standard conveyance system because it's decades old. And I'm not gonna just, I mean, I don't know if you guys feel differently. I feel like there are other elected officials in this community who are fine with just allowing this to happen to us, but I feel like we don't enjoy having to constantly manage brown water complaints and service interruption complaints. And I feel like we have a very serious fiduciary responsibility to approach this very differently, because it's also like very expensive and very time consuming for our consultants, for our staff to respond. And the DEP's thinking is that, well, we're doing this for you so that you have a backup system. And I back up against that because I feel like this is primarily a project for the city of New York, because they have to repair their maintenance. And additionally, it's like, we are not their partner. They sell us water at a premium rate. And I feel like it would be very different if this was more of a partnership where they weren't increasing the cost of water at like nearly 7% on an annualized basis, and then telling us, well, we also charge you these expensive rates, and then you have to jump through hoops and figure out how to pay for all those hoops, and that's on you. I feel like it's very unbecoming, and I'm not gonna sit idly and just tell our community, well, this is what the DEP wants to do, and whether we end up with more brown water and whether we end up, having to spend lots of money that we didn't anticipate to manage brown water and deal with breaks or deal with, just the staffing and the response that we need to, just have available to manage, their shutdowns is significant and material. This spring they were like, you have to put flashboards up at reservoir number 4. And like, that means that our staff then has to go do that instead of doing other things that they could be doing. We have to go buy materials. We have to use the design that we already paid for. It's just a very uneven, unfair relationship. And I think, we have to, respond. And, what this letter says, and this is a letter that I worked on with our attorneys, is it says that, well, we pay you for raw water every single month. We are going to stop paying you until we build an escrow of at least $500,000 so that we can then pay for the fact that you're asking us to do all these things for your project. And I feel very strongly about it. And I hope my colleagues on the village board too. And I would love to know whether or not our town colleagues felt similarly. Do they also think that this could be handled any differently?
I have that same question, Tim. I would love to know that, because it's like, I'm stressed out about the pressure, and just I know there's not to jinx it, but I know there's going to be another break in there, that's what happens with an old system when you mix things up, and to just turn and say, well, that's a local issue. Well, we're the guardians of your means of life, and we're happy guardians, but you have to be chill, so I really appreciate this letter and your approach to this issue that seems to be such an issue for all eternity.
I support the letter. I think it's essentially, like you said, you're advocating for our community. It sort of acts as like an insurance policy. And if the DEP says that it's a partnership, then they should understand the need for how we need to protect our community. So, think of anything, what we're displaying is the true sense of what a partnership should be and what people should look out for other people in that realm for. So I support the letter. Thank you for writing it.
And maybe this letter, yeah, exactly, Michelle. This letter might also just be the perspective that they just didn't have before, your example of the flashboards, at the dam at Reservoir 4, creating a budgetary shortfall of $33,059.16. What that means in Village of New Paltz terms means something different in New York City terms. And I think sometimes they just need to have these reminders. For us, that's a whole person's life, that's a whole thing, that's a whole project, that's a lot.
It nearly pays for a family plan.
Yeah.
Of health insurance for night shift for
Exactly.
one of our staff.
Like that's a whole staff person's insurance. There you go. You know, and I know they're playing with different numbers down there. So, you know, maybe this is the perspective that they need.
All right, so I move that we send the letter.
Second,
All in favor?
I,
And then the next item is, so we have a village code of ethics and we have members on our ethics board, but we had appointed Dennis Young some time ago, and I was glad to hear from Dennis. He's motivated to kind of make sure that we're following our own local code, which includes having a disclosure form filled out by our elected and appointed officials. So Dennis took the town's disclosure form and wanted to get that approved. I showed it with our attorney. He was perfectly fine with that form. And I just included the code from our local village code that speaks to disclosure of interest in legislation or other matter involving a conflict of interest. And that's why we'd be collecting this information from our electeds or appointed officials. So I just move that we adopt the form that Dennis Young is suggesting the ethics board use to collect this information.
second.
Any further discussion?
Just really glad about that. You know, I don't know, disclosure is so important. And like this issue comes up, you know, all the time at higher levels of government, and a form makes it that much easier to be totally above board rather than, you know, haphazard emails to, you know, everyone like, hello, I've been appointed to this thing, or now I'm a landlord. That wouldn't be coming from me, but yeah. So thanks to Dennis for getting us on that.
Yep. All in favor?
Hi,
Motion to move bills and claims.
second,
All in favor?
hi.
We don't have a planning board liaison update. And then the zoning board of appeals. Last night there was one agenda item regarding, there was no ZBA meeting last night, but there was an agenda item related to a area variance for 145 North Chestnut, and that would involve the side or the size of the side yard. So what's super curious about the NVR zoning is that it's written to encourage the way a downtown would feel, right? Like we want retail or offices, commercial on the ground floor and residential on the upper floor. And then we simultaneously want cars to be parked behind the building. So that can be tricky when you have requirements for apartments to have cars. So how do they get behind the building?
Yeah.
So, we want the side yards to be as small as possible, but we also want the cars to get back there. So the design that, and this is going to be the exact same situation for the project, but is it 137 North Chestnut? 137 is the former Gateway building and 145 is the former Agway building. So both of them are in the same situation where I think they're before the ZBA looking for an area variance so that they can have larger side yards to accommodate their driveways. And then I think in the case of 140 or 137 too, they also have a retention pond area too. And it makes a ton of sense that you don't want to put the driveway right on top of the retention area, right? Like you want a little pervious surface. So, if there were ever variances that made sense, and the ZBA may totally disagree with me. But I feel like the applicant's ask seems reasonable, but that's my ZBA liaison update. That will be on a forthcoming agenda when those guys meet.
Thank you.
Do we have anything else as a board? Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
All in favor?
Bye.